Breaking news, Trump has gotten the virus. Now, I'm sure I speak for most of us out there when I say that no matter what your political leanings are, whether you're on the right, the left, the center, or you just don't care that much about politics, we all wish the very best for the health of our elected officials. Whether it's Pelosi, McConnell, or yes, even Trump, we all want one thing, and that is what is best for our country. Because at the end of the day, every single one of us, and yes, even our politicians, are Americans, and we may disagree on how to get to what is best for the country, but we all are trying to do our very best, and that includes our elected officials. Now, with that being said, what does this mean for the stimulus bill negotiations and the stimulus check negotiations? How does Trump's illness impact the likelihood that a stimulus bill will be passed? Well, it turns out in times of crisis, and yes, this appears to be a time of crisis, Americans tend to pull together from the right and the left to get things done, and that appears no different today. We have optimistic statements from the Republicans and the Democrats expressing their support and their optimism that another stimulus bill will actually be passed rather soon. And even President Trump supports another stimulus bill. He just tweeted the following: "Our great USA wants and needs stimulus. Work together and get it done. Thank you." Now, that was tweeted from his hospital bed at the Walter Reed Medical Hospital, and it's likely the case that a lot of the Republican senators that are on the fence are going to read that, going to see President Trump's willingness and support for this stimulus bill, and maybe switch their positions and actually get a bill passed. Let me read you a few quotes that a few different advisors for the White House are saying, as well as some other politicians on the Democratic side of the aisle. White House advisor Stephen Moore, he said that there are narrowing differences and they're getting close to getting a deal done, and there's a 65% chance that they will get another deal done within the next 10 days. Even Nancy Pelosi says this kind of changes the dynamic here because Republicans finally see the reality of what we have been saying all along. This is a vicious virus, and I think that really is the key point here. The Democrats have always seemed to take the virus a little bit more seriously, at least express support for wearing masks and social distancing, than some people on the Republican side of the aisle. And now that President Trump has actually fallen ill to the virus, it seems to be the case that it's going to hit home for a lot of the senators on the Republican side who may have said, you know what, this isn't that big of a deal, why do we need another stimulus bill, and therefore switch their positions and pass something. On top of all that, we've all read the same headlines about airlines laying off tens of thousands of people, from Delta to United and other small airlines as well as Disneyland laying off tens of thousands of people themselves. These are news-grabbing headlines that are going to hit home to a lot of people. And it just so happens to be the case that a lot of these major employers happen to be in swing states. So it doesn't appear to be the case that politicians want to let these things just happen, fall by the wayside, and not pass any stimulus to cushion the blow. So where exactly are we in the stimulus bill negotiations? I'm about to get into that, but first, let me tell you, my name is Kevin Conway. For those who don't know, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and like the video if it helped you out in any way. Now let's get right into it. The House of Representatives on Thursday passed a bill that was $2.2 trillion and included a whole host of stimulus measures within it. Now, it's unlikely that that bill becomes law, but it is going to be the starting point of negotiations between the Democratic-controlled House and the Republican-controlled Senate. Some of the key points in this House bill that just passed on Thursday are, number one, an extension of the unemployment insurance benefits of $600 per week all the way until January of this year, another round of $1,200 stimulus checks, $25 billion of payroll money for airlines, $436 billion for state and local governments, $75 billion for tracking and tracing of the virus, and a couple $100 billion for a few other miscellaneous programs. Now, that is the House bill. That is $2.2 trillion. Now, the White House has actually put forward their support for a $1.6 trillion bill, and if you could do the math, there is a $600 billion difference between the House and the White House bills, but basically they're getting closer and closer and they're agreeing on some major points. It's just a dollar amount that is up for debate. For example, the House bill had $600 per week in unemployment insurance The White House supported bill has $400 per week in unemployment insurance. Now, the duration is slightly different. The Republican-controlled bill actually supports it all the way until December, whereas the Democratic bill supports it until January. But the major point is they agree on extension of federal unemployment insurance benefits. Another point that was a disagreement a few weeks ago, but now appears to just be a disagreement in the total price, not whether or not to do it, is the aid for state and local governments. As mentioned, the House of Representatives bill passed with $436 billion for state and local governments that have been impacted from loss of tax revenue collection, from sales tax to everything else in between. And the Republican bill out of the White House actually supports state and local governments as well, but to the tune of $250 billion. So they both support state and local government aid. That is different than it has been in the past. Before, the Republicans did not support state and local government aid at all. They didn't want to bail out the so-called blue states, but now it appears that they're going to put forward some state and local government aid in their bill. Other points of agreement that are just going to boil down to the total price and the implementation of this provision is tax credits for children. So both parties want to actually give tax credits for those with children in order to help them get through this financial time. And it's just a disagreement on the total amount. Same thing with tracing. So tracing and testing of the virus, both sides agree that needs to be done. And it's just the total dollar amount and the method of implementing it, which is up for debate at this moment. Now, what's really interesting is that the White House bill appears to support the $1,200 stimulus checks for a second round. We've had a few different White House advisors come out and say that they support that second round of stimulus checks in the manner that was given the first time. So that means the $1,200 stimulus check is going to get a second round, and that is explicit in the Democratic House bill, which is passed and actually has that second round of $1,200 stimulus checks for those who are making below $75,000 or the married couples that are making below $150,000. What's really interesting is that when the House of Representatives passed the bill on Thursday, they did so with no Republican support and also 18 of their own Congresspeople, the Democrats, not supporting that bill either. And the reason they didn't support the bill, the reason those Democratic congressmen didn't support the bill, is because they were frustrated with the all or nothing approach. They were frustrated with the idea that they're passing a $2.2 trillion bill as opposed to a few very specific bills that everybody already agrees on and then hammering out the details later. This appears to be what has slowed down the second stimulus bill from really passing, because we're debating not just whether or not we should do more tracing, whether or not there should be an expansion of unemployment benefits, but we're latching on a whole lot of programs, a whole lot of money for things that aren't exactly directly related to this virus. And then that is where the frustration has boiled down for a lot of these Congress people. And that's really the way it's been for several months, and that's why nothing has passed. But there appears to be, again, some more optimism, and here's why. Because on Friday, the House of Representatives took up a bill to pass $25 billion of airline relief just for payroll, so that those individuals who would have been fired, those tens of thousands of individuals that would have been fired, could actually still remain on payroll until around March 2021, hopefully at a time when we have a vaccine and people can begin traveling again. Now, while that bill didn't pass, the very fact that it was brought up, that singular bill for $25 billion, something very, very specific, airline relief, that is optimistic in and of itself, because it appears that these people in Congress recognize the ability to just pass something, whether it's a smaller bill, whether it is a directly targeted bill, something to get it going, and then negotiate the bigger provisions, the more provisions that they're further apart on at a later time. So the House is currently on recess, but they could actually be called back within 24 hours to vote on a bill if they actually come to agreement with the Senate on the bill, such that it'll be passed through and actually signed into law. And lastly, we had the jobs report just released showing an addition of 661,000 jobs in the month of September. Now, normally in a normal month, in a normal economy, that would be an outstanding number. I mean, 3 times higher than what is normal, but it is not actually that good in the month of September, and here's why. Because it actually showed that while the unemployment rate declined from 8.1% to 7.9%, the labor force participation rate actually fell dramatically, which explained the large dip in unemployment rate from 8.1 to 7.9. So you may be asking yourself, what does that exactly mean? Well, the unemployment rate is actually taken into account how many people are actually looking for a job. So if you're not looking for a job anymore, you just happen to be unemployed in the traditional sense, not having a job, well then you're not counted for the unemployment rate. So if you stop looking for a job completely, then the labor force participation rate, which is what it sounds like, how many people in the labor force are participating, trying to get a job, that actually falls. And that's exactly what we saw in the jobs report. So that's why the addition of 661,000 jobs was not actually very good. It showed a deceleration of jobs addition. So we had 1 million jobs added in a month, 800,000 added in a month, now 600,000. The worry is that we're going to start slowing down again and actually come to a point of stagnation, or worse off, we're going to actually enter again into a recessionary period where we start losing jobs. That's the fear. So overall, we can see how Trump's illness, the motivations politically for these people in Congress, the fact that the unemployment rate has fallen but not for the right reasons, and a whole host of other factors might motivate those in Congress to get together and pass something finally, whether it's a piecemeal bill or more likely something in between that 1.6 and 2.2 trillion dollar number. And all of that being said, it looks again as if we have that agreement on stimulus checks from both Republicans and the Democratic sides. So let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. I want to hear how you're doing out there. I want to hear what you think about these stimulus bills and how all of this makes you feel about the upcoming election. Please let me know in the comments below. I'm looking forward to reading them. With that being said, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe. And as always, give a like to this video. I really appreciate your support. I'll see you next time. Thanks.